Welcome into the September 8th episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We'll have a big-time guest on today's show. That's right, former Toronto Maple Leaf and colleague of mine at TSN, Frank Corrado, will join us on the show today. Really excited to get into it, so let's not wait any longer. This is today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother, on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me is my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also now catch us up on video format up on YouTube. Search up Locked On Leafs on YouTube and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the guy right down below me. I told you guys we were going to have a special guest, the former Maple Leaf, joining the show today, and here he is. It's Frank Corrado. Frankie C. What's up, my pal?
Not much, buddy. Happy to be jumping on the mic with you. It's been a while since we did a show together. We had some Leafs lunch cameos, I guess, if you want to say, but season's right around the corner. I think we'll be seeing a lot of each other and talking a lot of Leafs pretty soon.
I would imagine so. I'd imagine we'll be seeing each other. I mean, I think I'm going to be in studio Friday, so I'll probably see you later today.
I'll see you there. Yeah, I'll see you there.
Yeah, you'll be in there doing overdrive and whatnot. Yeah. So, for those who don't know Frankie, I don't know if you're living under a rock, but former Vancouver Canuck, Pittsburgh Penguin, of course, played for the Maple Leafs. Had a couple of stints with the Marlies as well. Played a season in Sweden. Last year was in Riga, Latvia. Of the KHL. Definitely going to get a story or two out of your time there because I've heard some wild things about what it's like playing over in Russia. And then also, like you've dipped your toes into the media world. So we'll definitely ask you how things have been going over the course of the last years. You've been getting acquainted, I suppose, with TSN and all that, and obviously get your thoughts on what's going on with the current Maple Leafs. And I think things stack up heading into the season, but. Let's start with the media thing because, it's funny. You were on this show early in its infancy, actually, even way before you were here, Dave. But Frank came on my show, like, what would that have been, 2-3 years ago, maybe? You came on the show?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it was right before you left for Sweden because I remember you telling me we were talking about you were going to Sweden. It was like right 2 days after you signed your contract or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would have been a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And so welcome back, obviously. But
oh, thank you.
You now kind of transitioning a little bit, or at least while you're currently injured on the mend, whatever phrasing you want to use, getting your toes wet in the media world. What's that been like?
It's been good, man. It kind of came at an interesting time for me coming home from Riga in the KHL. Just had a little bit of a laundry list of things that had gone wrong health-wise, and got to give you some credit. I think you put my name in at TSN 1050 for a phone hit on Leafs Lunch one day. Actually, the Steve Dangle podcast was really cool. I got to do an episode with them, and that got a lot of great feedback, but it just seemed like that phone hit on Leafs Lunch kind of snowballed into, some co-hosting when your co-host Julia was gone for a couple days. And then, from there turned into doing some analysis, pre and post game intermissions with Jim Taddy. And then it's kind of evolved a little more to the point where I got TV work with the CHL on TSN. I thought that was really cool. It was a very eye-opening experience for me to see how that works. Even just the logistics of it, right? Like, I think when you watch a hockey game, you don't necessarily realize all the grunt work that goes into it behind the scenes to produce it. At least I didn't. I didn't know that, during a game, analysts are sitting there with their microphone on their tie telling the truck, hey, can you pull this clip? Can you pull that clip? Hey, at 5:07, there was a hit. Can you pull that? And just what a mad dash it is as the period is finishing to kind of iron out, okay, what am I going to say? What's Carlo going to say? How are we going to phrase this? And tell the story of what happened in the period. Those moments leading up to the start of the intermission show, it really emulates what it feels like in a game. A game situation, you get your heartbeat pumping. You have to be on, you have to be focused, and you have to be sharp. And even though some of our intermission chats can range anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes, those are 2 to 4 minutes where you need to be really dialed in. You have to make sense with what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Yeah.
I find it really cool. I find it like very invigorating to be a part of. And this summer has been great, doing a lot of radio stuff, a lot of overdrive, a little more long-winded, long format stuff. I just think it's helpful, right? It's helpful to get those reps and to have a little more time to get your point across. The one thing that we do actually on overdrive on Mondays is the playmaker of the weekend, and I find that one emulates an intermission, I guess, hit very, very closely, because we pre-tape it. You have your talking point. Like for me last week, I was doing Nick Kyrgios talking about how he had a great match against Medvedev. I had my points. I hit them all within, 30 to 45 seconds. That's exactly what it's like on a hockey panel broadcast. So it's been fun. Like it kind of came at a time where I was home. I was rehabbing, wasn't sure what I was doing. Probably a little too much time on my hands. So it was nice to kind of have that reprieve and that getaway. And it's kind of turned into something a little bit more now. And it's, I'm very grateful for it. Obviously very happy to be doing it, and most importantly, having fun and enjoying it.
What's it like, being a former player and then having to go about criticizing a current player, knowing you've been in their skates before?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think
your former teammates too, like some of these guys early in the Maple Leafs, like them. You know these guys. Even like you interviewed Nazem Kadri the other day. It's a former teammate of yours.
Yeah, it's a little strange, especially a guy like Naz who's older than me. It feels weird that I would be interviewing him while he's still playing, but it's strange how that works. I always had, I had good relationships with the members of the media, and when I played, and I hope we get back to this day soon where media members can actually be in the dressing room after morning skate and after practice. I think that does a lot for, I guess, the trust level between certain members of the media and the players. But, I had time for a lot of people, and I always kind of thought about it this way. You have a job to do as a member of the media, but if you're going to criticize me, if you're going to say something, make it something that you would actually say to my face. Right? Like be there, show up in the morning, show up at practice, show up at morning skate, no problem. Say what you got to say, but keep it fair to the point that it's something that you would be comfortable saying to my face in person. Right. So I think that's something that I'd like to remember too. And I also would like to approach it with like a little more of a little more facts behind it, right? Like we talk Al's brother, we talk about hot takes and the eye test versus the analytics guys, right? Like I feel like if the proof is in the pudding, you're not just making some outlandish opinion or hot take and throwing a guy under the bus. Like you add credibility to your name and to your narrative and what you're saying when you can say, I believe this, and here's the proof right here, and it's in the numbers. So there's a way you can integrate both of them, and it actually adds more credibility to what you're saying as well, instead of sounding off on someone for no reason or what might seem like no reason, or going off on long rants and tangents where it might not even make any sense. And that's how you can burn bridges, I think.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation too, because you're somebody who I think likes to kind of float in the middle a little bit. Maybe you lean a little more eye test than you do analytics. I think I lean slightly more about the numbers, but what I think we both realize is that they're both needed, right? Like the eye test tells you one thing, but you could support it. And in radio, this is really important, I find, because you don't have clips to show like you do when you're on like overdrive or on a broadcast or something like that. You need those analytics, you need those proofs. And print, it's really obviously a lot more imperative that you have those analytics as well and those numbers. And it's funny because, I mean, in the comment section, you've been there, like on Overdrive, on Leafs Lunch, whatever it is. There's so many people online who are so hard-headed, and they're like, I don't care about O-Dog is like this.
Yeah,
it's like, of course he expected this, expected what? Expected squat is what he'll say. But I mean, ultimately, sometimes you can use it a lot.
You can use them, man. Yeah, you can cherry pick ones that you like to make your point. You can cherry pick ones that you don't like to discredit your point. Like, there's always going to be a little bit of that. But I think ultimately, my experience as a player, as a player who's been in the game recently, obviously helps. With how I'm viewing the game, and I think hockey works in cycles as well, right? Like every so often, I don't have an exact number, but systems will change. The way players are operating and doing things logistically, whether it's pre-game, post-game, like those kinds of rituals, those change. So I think it's important, as someone who's current, to stay current, right? And make sure that if I can bring you into the dressing room, or I can bring you into the meetings that happen, that's something that's going to be important to stay current with.
Yeah, I think you do a great job of doing that when you do go on all the broadcasts, and it's something that I think a lot of people do enjoy. You have that, like, something that I could never provide in a broadcast. So when you are on our show, you're able to give that insight on what it's like to be an NHLer, and you're kind of pulling the curtain for the listener and the average viewer who will never get that opportunity. And I think that's incredibly valuable. So, being able to get out into the media this past year and providing a lot of our viewers here, whether it's on TSN, Overdrive, Locked On, it's been really valuable information.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, I've met a lot of people. I think where I really realized it was when I started dating my wife. Obviously, you get to know the family, and people have questions, right? Like, whether it's my father-in-law or Jess's uncles, like, people have all these interesting questions that I wouldn't have even thought that I would get asked these things, but they're generally curious questions, and a lot of the answers that I would give them surprise them oftentimes. And it really got me thinking, like, you know what? There's a lot of things that, when you peel the curtain back a little bit, I don't think people realize this, right?
Give us an example. Like, give us an example of a question that you get asked where you're like, oh, people care to know about this?
Yeah, like, I think one of the ones I got asked early on was, why don't you guys travel day of game? Or do you travel day of game? And how does the whole plane system work? Like, how does customs work? Like, and these are things you wouldn't even think about. Like, you wouldn't even think about any of these things. But, when I told them we always travel day before the game. And then, why? Well, it's in the CBA. And so you go down that rabbit hole. And then you tell them, okay, so we go, when we do travel, we all go to, like, the private terminal, the hangar there. We hop on a bus. Then we go do customs, in Pearson, like, with all the other people. We just roll through customs. And there's people there asking for autographs and all that stuff. And then we roll back onto that bus, and then we go through. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's elements that people would never think about unless you actually lived it. And so, when I started getting all these questions, it was cool to answer them and see the look of shock on some people's faces, thinking like, oh, I never would have thought that.
Interesting.
And like, we're seeing now, especially with like the rise of player podcasts, how many former players are playing podcasts? Yeah. And has that something you ever thought about, or I know you probably have guessed it on a few of them since you've with your time off now. Like, what do you feel like that's brought up a new kind of realm into, like, hockey media and all that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's, I think, is going to get more popular within the game of hockey. I think what is waiting in the game of hockey is one big star or former star. Like, I know we have Spit and Chicklets is awesome. Like, O'Brien and Upshaw, they have Missing Curfew, which I think is great too. Maybe at some point there's going to be a guy who's in the league, like a bigger, more outspoken player who's in the league who wants to do more daily, day-to-day stuff that's happening within the league, like less like hockey lifestyle.
Yeah, kind of like Draymond Green and his podcast. That he
right. Like less hockey lifestyle stuff, but more, day-to-day and those guys incorporate that too. They do a really good job of talking about the daily, I guess, what the narratives are around the league. But, as far as players in the league, I feel like there's still an appetite for someone who's outspoken, who's articulate, who can do that kind of stuff. Very similar to Draymond, like you said. As for myself, like I haven't really thought about doing my own podcast. I don't know if I have the host gene, like Al's brother. That's your thing. You like to steer the ship. You just tell me where to go, and we kind of go from there. But I'm happy. I'm plenty, I guess, busy with like the season's around the corner. I'm gonna be doing the pregame, postgame, and intermission analysis with the Tatman, Jim Taddy, which is I'll be doing whatever I can do on Leafs Lunch with you filling in on overdrive when the chance comes up, and we'll have our CHL games starting at some point. If there's any NHL TV, there's a lot going on. But yeah, I think there's definitely an appetite for a player, like a current player, to have a podcast that's I guess coming out weekly or semi-daily on what's happening in the league.
Who would be a player for you? Who do you think would be the ideal player?
I don't know. Like, so the first name that comes to mind for me is PK. Yes. Yeah. And I think if he doesn't play this year, like, I think if it's a situation where he's getting offered $750 on a one-way somewhere, I don't know. Like, I think ESPN is sitting there saying, we'll pay you $1 million, man. Like, or TNT. Like, I could just see it happening. And so he seems like a guy who would have a lot to say. He's very well spoken. He's articulate. He would have some cool stories as well. And he's a guy who's not going to be afraid to like sit on either side of something. Like, if he tells you, like, if he thinks something is bad, he's going to tell you. If he thinks it's good, he'll tell you that way too. I don't think he's going to sit on the fence on too many things, which I think is great.
I think low key might be a pretty good one too, who's a little bit of a character personality. Ryan Reeves. I feel like Ryan Reeves would be a nice
former teammate of mine. He was always a guy you could count on to have a spicy take or have an opinion on something. That would be a really good one as well.
Yeah, Reaver would be an interesting one. Frank, there's so much more that we got to get into. Got to ask you. We got to talk about the FreeFrankie movement because that has to come up. It always does. And then obviously we want to get your thoughts on what's going on with the Maple Leafs this season, the current day Toronto Maple Leafs, and where you think they could be heading. But before we do, let me tell you guys all about one of today's show sponsors.
All right. Yes, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And if you haven't tried the new Puffs flavor yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, guys, because when are you going to have a chocolate cookie dough puff? Like, I don't know where you're going to get one of those. It's covered in 100% real chocolate. It has 160 calories and a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. So make sure you run to Built.com to snag a box for you. And if you're feeling a little, giving, if you want to give some to your family, you can go grab some for them as well. So, or you can just find a hiding place, whatever you decide to do. Just remember that Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate.
Man.
What's that?
You selfish man.
I am very selfish. I always keep Built Bars in my office here for myself.
They're delicious. They're delicious.
So you're gonna love the new cookie dough chunk puff. I'm sure, Mike, you've tried it. We got a little sample of it. It's one of my favorites. So whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or you just need to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built Bar. And to give you a little extra sweetness to this deal, go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order at Built.com.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me. We are your hosts here on the show. We got a special guest, Frank Corrado, former Toronto Maple Leaf and current TSN personality, joining us here today. And Frank, again, we appreciate you taking your join us.
I appreciate that, but I like that you call me a personality. That means there's more, there's more to it than just the analysis and stuff. There's a little character, there's a little charisma behind it. That's very flattering.
But it's all charisma. You're bang up. You know what I love, Dave? I'm going to tell you something that I love about Frankie, and it's hilarious too. He always comes prepared with like a story. He's got a story he wants to tell, something that happened, whether it was on the golf course or like he lives a little bit of like a Seinfeld life. I feel, Frankie.
A little bit.
Got something going on in your life that you just want to talk about, and it's always a good, fun, funny story. And also, like you'll be like, "Let me come into break with this." And you just want to come into the break, sharing the story, and start off going off the rails a little bit for a couple of minutes, and then we get back into the hockey talk. It's always, and that's honestly,
we got to keep it light, man. We got to keep it light. Listen, we could talk about Leafs all day long, but I think sometimes people just want a little brevity in their day and have a laugh. Absolutely. And we got lots of time to talk Leafs.
Well, that's why people love Overdrive, because that's one of those shows that they do that. Like the first 15 minutes of that show, I mean, they could be talking about anything, literally.
Oh, yeah.
Let's grab that clip that you guys brought up on the show the other day of that guy who was down proposing the cramp proposal.
Oh my God, this guy.
So
I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen it until we got on the air. And I don't know if that's Hayes and Grappler just keeping it from, like, I don't know how I hadn't seen it, but this poor guy had, his hamstring must have convulsed. His hamstring was having a seizure as he's trying to propose.
It's so
I couldn't control myself laughing on the air.
Oh my God, it was so funny. Dave, I think we got the clip. Why don't you pull it up so we could show everybody who's watching it exactly what happened in the video.
Right now, so we can discuss it after we play. So here we go.
We want to tell his story, and he thinks he wants to say something.
Best proposal ever. Come on, buddy. Go on.
She said yes. Did you say yes? She said yes.
I love the guy right at the end running through as if none of this is going on.
Oh,
he's like,
it's even more crazy with the audio. I've never heard it with the audio. I just saw the visual of it. That's crazy. Like you could hear a pin drop when he started having that spasm.
Right? And like everyone knew what was happening, obviously. He gets down on a knee, starts to bring out a ring, and then they like start to fall, or he like falls over. It's like, oh no, I felt
classic.
His arms like twitching. It's like going all over his body too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And, like he could barely say the words, "Will you marry me?" It was, oh man,
amazing.
Tough go. And I hope that when my time comes, I don't have a terrible.
Well, next time we interview Joe Bowen, I'm gonna bring you some like electrolytes or something, because I can't have you having cramps in studio. Like that happened during Leafs lunch. We were on a Zoom call. We're doing an interview with Joe Bowen, and you're doing a happy dance around the studio.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on over there, man? You're chugging water. You got the Gatorade bottle going. Like I thought you were like 1 second away from just squirting water all over your face, like you're in the second period and you've played 15 minutes already. But
I've had 48 shots. Yeah, that part is that was the first time it ever happened, and it happened to me again this summer when Luca was with me, and we were live in studio, and I randomly get up like. It was just as we were coming out of commercial too. So we were just coming out of commercial, and I just like stand up, and I'm sitting there trying to stretch out the hammy, but trying to bring in our guest. And Luca's sitting there just like looking at me like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, why 100%. Is he standing up? I was so actually, I think Tony was coming on with us. Tony Ferrari was a friend of the show. He was joining us on gameplay. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, I'm going to be that guy, because it's already happened to me twice while sitting in a chair.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be that guy.
Next time you run the 40. You run the 40.
Somebody actually, I think it was Grappler, did put that out on the Overdrive Twitter account of me running or that guy, and it said, "This is Al's brother after running the 40." It's like, oh, come on. Come on. Look, Frankie, I want to chat a little bit about the FreeFrankie movement. And I'm sure you've talked about it on every show that you've ever been on. We talked about it when you were with us a couple of years ago, but we've had so many more people hop on to the Locked On Leafs podcast since then. And I just want to, how much do you think, like when you think back on that whole situation, what do you think of now? I guess the fact that you are still living in Toronto, and I almost wonder, because it's not every day that like a 7th, 8th defenseman becomes like a well-known player in an organization. Like, did it kind of help you with this whole media thing too, that everybody kind of knows who you are and you have a little bit of credibility because of that whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it adds credibility. I think ultimately what you say and how you say it is going to be your credibility. But I just think it adds a little name value to my name. Listen, man, I couldn't understand it. Like, I was the 8th defenseman. Make no mistake. I was not the 7th guy. Like, there was 2 guys needed to get hurt for me to go in. And oftentimes after games, especially when we lost, I would see it. There it was, FreeFrankie trending. Or, I couldn't understand why the 8th defenseman was in the news so much. But I guess, you know what, when I look back at it now, I was 22, 23 years old when that went down. And it's young, and it was young. It was weird to see a guy that age sitting on the sidelines for so long, right? Like, you see guys who play, they're in and out of the lineup at that age. They're kind of getting their feet wet in the league. And yeah, you play some games, you sit some games. That's part of getting to know the league, getting to know yourself as a player, all that kind of stuff. I just think with how long how prolonged it was, I think that was what people found weird about it. I think that's what I found difficult with it. Like, I knew there would reach a certain threshold where it was like, I'm never playing. Like, I'm not getting in the lineup. And it was bad. It was bad because I built, like, bad habits on the ice, and you get this feeling of defeat almost. And I don't know, every once in a while you'd see that trending on Twitter, and you're like, oh, that's nice. It's nice to see people, are rooting for me. They don't even really know if I'm that good of a player, but they would like to see me out there, which I think is very endearing and nice. And I think it's been good now in the media thing where people know who I am. It kind of helps with a little bit of the camaraderie as far as, I'm hopping on overdrive, and people are, I guess, it's seen in a positive light now, which is really cool. So yeah, it was interesting. That's for sure. Ultimately, you always wish that things went a little better,
Right.
Played a little more, played a little better, but you have to find some positives in situations in life. And I think, with the FreeFrankie and where I'm at now, I think that is, at the end of the day, it is a positive. There's a positive to be found there.
And at the time, Lou Lamoriello was the general manager, right? Like, what were those conversations like with Lou during?
Yeah, Lou was good. Like, Lou was good. Lou was fair. He has his whole shtick that he does, but Lou was fair with me. Kind of preached patience, and I think ultimately we got to the point where it was, we had an understanding that there was someone in the way. Someone was not going to play me, regardless of the team's performance or how well I guess did in training camp or practice. Like, that's the thing too. Like, when you're not playing, like, you can only do so much in practice. You can only do so much in the weight room to try and get yourself in a game, right? So it's hard to prove yourself without the games. It's like the chicken and the egg situation. But I think we just got to the point where Lou and I had an understanding that if it wasn't going to get resolved, he would find a new home for me. And ultimately, that's what he did in Pittsburgh. And that's a whole, that's kind of when my injury troubles kind of start. And I think I also went to Pittsburgh, mentally scarred from the situation in Toronto. I think there was situations that arose that I could have handled better mentally. And but that's part of being an athlete. Not every day is easy. Not every day is a walk in the park. And for someone like me, it was, just to get to that point. Just to get to that point in the NHL, I was a guy who always had to work really hard. Like, I wasn't one of those guys that was the most talented player. Like, I was cut in minor hockey multiple times. I kind of stuck with it. So I think I always had that kind of I don't want to say underdog mentality, but it was never easy for me by any stretch of the imagination. So it was really cool to play in Toronto. It was amazing to play NHL games. Very grateful for all of it, and very grateful for the support I got along the way.
All right, that wraps up part 1 of our conversation. We ended up having a little bit of a lengthier chat with Frankie, so we decided to split it up into 2 parts. We had our chat today, and then tomorrow, for Friday's episode, we're going to get into his thoughts on the Maple Leafs and what they're doing, their off season, and his thoughts on the upcoming year for Toronto as well. So that'll be for tomorrow's show. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms to receive daily Leafs content. Also, go follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube as well if you haven't already. Follow us on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck is mine, at D_Morassutti is Dave's. Also, leave a like if you're watching on YouTube as well. Comment down below. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Part 2 of the Frank Corrado interview will be dropping tomorrow, so make sure that you put the little notification bell if you're on YouTube so that you can get notified when it drops, and you can go and check back for part 2. But that does it for us here today. We'll be back for tomorrow's episode. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.